So what are the goals of this event? We'd like to frame things for the future, to try to help to guide and inspire EIB and One CG as we strive to meet the 6 funders' requests. So there'll be a special prize for whoever can get those in the chat the fastest. And all of this obviously within the context of moving forward with One CG and the reforms. We'd like people to share some solutions. There are a lot of challenges that we face, and we'd like to look at some examples of whether that's centralization or modernization successes that can be adapted by others. So people, please share your problems and share some of the solutions that you've got to those. And then finally, we really want to highlight partners. Yeah, this is not all about EIB and the core team. This is really about the broad network of people who are involved, and making sure that we share the successes and the impacts, and that we do effectively learn from one another as part of this process. So before we dive in, a big thanks to all of our partners. And this is just a selection of the partners here. So many thanks to the funders, without which we would not be able to endeavour to make the improvements that we're trying to implement. Thanks to our many partners across the CG and the NARS, who we work with extensively, who are really at the coalface, really driving forwards the improvements in modernisation and breeding. For a full list of all of the partners, please look at the Excellence in Breeding website. So over to the agenda. For day 1, we have a very short session. So what we're going to try and hit today is really talking about the impacts, looking at EIB and One CG. So we'll have some discussions and some presentations from Michael Quinn and Barbara Wells. We'll have a module spotlight, so a very quick overview of some of the highlights from the different modules that will be presented by the EIB module leads. We won't have time for any discussion at that point. However, we are having a module open house, or at least the first open house for the modules. And this is for interested partners to have more in-depth discussions within the modules. And if you don't get to speak to your favored module today, there is another opportunity on day 3 to do this, on Thursday to do this. Okay, so you can see the outline of days 2 and day 3. I won't go through them now. And then next week, we will have the Stories of Excellence sessions, just to give you a bit of an overview. And so with that, we move on to the first meaty section of today. So first of all, as I mentioned, we'll have a presentation by Michael Quinn, who is the Director of EIB, who will talk to us about genetic gain and variety turnover goals, focusing on those 6 requests, and just giving a brief update of some of the progresses and some of the highlights. And then we'll hand over to Barbara Wells, who is the Global Director of Genetic Innovations in the One CG, and also the Director of SIP. And Barbara will give a short overview, focusing on some of the impacts on breeders of EIB services and some of the results in farmers' fields. So Michael, are you ready to present?
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, so I'll give a bit of a description of what we can expect in terms of breeding under One CG. Well, thank you very much, Sarah, for the introduction, and thanks to everybody for making the time. I know that it's a very busy time at the moment, so I really do appreciate you making the time to join us today. I want to give you a bit of a high-level view of what can be expected going forward from breeding under One CG, from the perspective of the 6 funders' requests that we've been working towards for 18 months now, and the perspective of excellence in breeding, and trying to sort of move that towards the direction that breeding is going, and how that integrates. I will put in a plug just very briefly for an accelerated breeding initiative town hall, which I'm planning to put on the calendar for the week after next. I know everybody's very busy, and so it's not obligatory. It's just for anyone who wants to understand a little bit more. There'll be some more detail there about how accelerated breeding will look, or that initiative, which does describe in more detail the breeding. But this presentation, I'll just give a high-level view of the direction we're going from the Crops and Hunger and EiB perspective. So, starting with the goals, at a high level, what we're breeding towards and what we're looking to achieve is to make contributions to nutrition, health and food security, affordable, healthy diets for 3 billion people, climate adaptation, effectively providing varieties that are better adapted to a changing climate, gender equality, youth and social inclusion, so to close the gender gap, poverty reduction, so lifting 500 million people out of poverty, and environmental health and biodiversity, zero net deforestation, which of course, if we've got higher producing, we've got greater agricultural production from better varieties, then there's less pressure on deforestation. So we're not going to achieve this just with breeding, but these are the goals that we're wanting to contribute to with breeding, the high level goals. So why are we doing this? I mean, just taking one of those 5, taking food security as an example, why are we needing to work so hard towards this? If we look at this graph, we can see that there's been fantastic production gains just using wheat and maize as an example. And it's not only the staples though, there's the same story for many other crops, and roots, tubers, bananas and legumes are all playing a critical role for poverty alleviation and nutrition and food security. But if we look at the tremendous gains that have occurred over the last 50, 60 years, if we are to continue with that rate, we're going to fail to meet projected demand. And that's even before you consider the downward pressure from climate change, water scarcity and diseases. So the pressure is on, and the consequences are going to be very real if we're unable to meet the challenge, which I'm sure we're going to be up to the challenge, but there is work to be done. So how do we achieve these goals? We do it through a product-oriented approach and being focused on the performance of those products. So that's the genetic gain piece. And how do we measure our progress to go against those? Well, we've got the Crops and Hunger indicators, and so here we've got the indicators are rate of genetic gain and variety turnover, and the goals are to have an increased rate of genetic gain in the form of farmer preferred varieties to at least 1.5% per year, and to have area weighted average age of varieties of less than 10 years. So this is taking the product oriented approach. This is if you've got the right product, then varieties will be turning over and farmers will be adopting these products. And we've got the genetic gain, which is ensuring that those products are consistently getting better and better, and that the performance is being addressed. Okay, so sorry, my computer's a bit slow here. So moving forward to what you can expect under 1CG, first, I'm going to just have a quick look at the excellence in breeding functions. And so within excellence in breeding, you're all very aware that we've got the 5 interlinked modules that are working together towards these high-level goals. And of course, we've got our cross-cutting work as well, the CGIAR engagement and toolbox, etc. And the point I want to make here is that all existing excellence in breeding functions are going to continue within the genetic innovation initiatives, specifically within the Accelerated Breeding Initiative, the Network for Enabling Technologies, Tools and Shared Services Initiative, and the Market Intelligence and Product Profile Initiative. And I would say that, in fact, the functions that are existing in excellence in breeding are likely to even become expanded going forward, because if you look at the work, for example, in market intelligence and product profiles. I mean, that has been a major component of one of our modules, whereas going forward, it's a whole initiative, and they're going to take on a broader range within that initiative than what we've been able to take on within excellence in breeding. And so I'm really very excited and looking forward to this new era. Okay, so what do we expect from breeding under 1CG? You can expect a fully integrated global breeding organisation that has resources that are aligned with potential for impact, has stronger CGIARs and small, medium enterprise breeding partnerships, enhanced use of genetic resources, accelerated and optimised breeding for increased rates of genetic gain, and effective seed delivery and demand creation. I can go into I'll go into that, what that means, each one shortly, but each of those are going to be done in the context of responding to these 6 funders' requests, which you're all, I'm sure, very familiar with. I can run through them again very quickly. I won't spend a lot of time on this because we've gone through this many times, but to develop pipeline investment cases and product profiles and align with market segments, etc., to make sure that breeding teams are incentivized for the incentivization and performance management is aligned with those high-level goals that I mentioned earlier, that there's an effective seed delivery system in place and demand creation, quantitatively optimized breeding pipelines to increase genetic gain, that we implement and use shared services, and we build CGIARs breeding networks and NARS capacity. So back to what we can expect from breeding under 1CG, what each of these higher level headings that I mentioned earlier actually mean. So having resources aligned with potential for impact means being impact driven and demand led. It means that each breeding pipeline presents a well-defined pipeline investment case that supports strategic allocation of resources and resource mobilisation, and that we have alignment of breeding decisions with drivers of adoption and consumer and stakeholder needs. So this is that we have target product profiles and that we're using these to drive our breeding decisions. And by having these well-defined breeding pipelines, we can ensure that we are structured in such a way that we don't have gaps in market segments, that we don't have overlaps, that we don't have multiple pipelines breeding for the same market segment, and that we don't have individual pipelines that are breeding for multiple product profiles that are genetically dissimilar, or target population of environments that are not correlated, because that will quickly erode the rate of genetic gain that can be achieved for any one. So that's what that piece is about. On the partnership side, having CG breeding programs that are well integrated and aligned with NARS's goals and ambitions, that we focus on breeding networks rather than individual CG breeding programs. And indeed, the Gates Foundation have announced that going forward, that they at least plan to be funding CG NARS breeding networks as opposed to CG programs. To augment the NARS's role, for them to have a stronger role in the downstream part of the breeding process, the variety development, and for the CG to have a strong focus on the population improvement side. To leverage CG resources to support and fund greater NARS participation in CG NARS breeding networks. This will result in greater resources for NARS and supporting them to be stronger partners in this CG NARS breeding network. It's well known that there are some cases that there are NARS programs that don't have the operating funds to provide what might currently be needed to participate. But if we can make more resources available, then we can use that to address that situation. And a partnership model that supports increased NAS breeding capacity. And really, I mean, this is about not diluting, but this is really about synergy. And if you want to go far, you go together. And that's certainly not my quote. It's one that I stole, but it works very, very well for this situation. Okay, enhanced use of genetic resources. We've got a whole initiative going forward on the gene banks, and we've got a whole work package within the accelerated breeding initiative looking at this, to have separation of variety development from trait deployment. That is the new germplasm company. Dedicated trait discovery and trait deployment programs implementing standardized current best practices. So for the first time, we can implement these standardized current best practices across the system in a way that's really not been possible with the fragmented approach we've had in the past, and sort of more center-driven approach. And prioritization of allocation of resources and traits, and this work in general, a process that looks at alignment with the product profile, expected impact of the trait discovery or trait deployment work, and the likelihood of success. We all know that there's been everywhere, in the CG, in the private sector, in the public sector outside of the CG. I know in Australia that there are many, many examples of this upstream work that has not gone anywhere. And so there's a component of this where there is risk, that's fine, and it's not always going to go all the way through, but with a more business-like approach, we can look at these three factors for implementing a prioritization process. Accelerated and optimized breeding. To have performance management aligned with genetic gain and variety turnover. So that's the incentivization piece. Dedicated efforts to better understand the impact. So this is about having metrics that we're regularly reviewing and calculating, so such as realized genetic gains and predicted genetic gains, and there's a whole project underway right now that's looking at what is actually being grown, so that we can measure the area weighted average age of varieties in farmers' fields, and to measure this in a standardized and scientifically robust way. And of course, optimized breeding schemes, looking at the components of the breeder's equation. This is the work that Eduardo and his team are working on within the optimization module, or the breeding scheme module in excellence in breeding, looking at the breeding cycle time, that's the age of parent, the data accuracy, selection intensity, and genetic diversity. Just having a quick look at the time here. Okay, I'm going to have to wrap this up pretty soon. Okay, so we've also got, within excellence in breeding, we've got many tools and services which we have developed and are available. I'm not going to go into that in detail. I won't go through all of this, but just to say that there have been many successes, and here's just 6 high-level ones. That, I mean, in the last year, Peter Coldrake, a consultant working with us in excellence in breeding, has worked with the breeding teams, the breeding teams in CG, to identify 142 breeding pipelines. Is the first time we've had this high-level inventory of all the pipelines in the system. Where we're now regularly reporting on progress against these 6 funders' requests, most recently with genetic gain, and that's been a big success. For this 3rd request, there's going forward, we've got a whole initiative on this, so I think that's a big step forward. Seed Equal. Breeding programs they've changed their mindset. I think this is one of the biggest things around the optimization of breeding schemes. But there have been tangible things as well, with parent selection and shortening cycle times, etc. We've got shared services. We've got the newly launched genotyping service, or EBS, and BMS, which IBP have offered, and we're working with them. We've got informatics networks. So we're moving towards a model that better leverages investment across crops and centres. And we've got NAS breeding networks and capacity. We've got Bish has developed a model which has been incorporated into initiative development. And so that's going to be rolled out going forward. And we've got, and we continue to support and mentor NAS programs. So here's my last slide. The overarching theme about what we're about here in excellence in breeding and what I've just presented and what we're implementing going forward is to drive change and to move towards improved programs. CG breeding is having tremendous impact, and at the same time, we still have opportunities in front of us. And so that's our job, is to, whether we're scientists, leaders, managers, technicians, funders, or policymakers, I see it that our job is to drive positive change. And we are seeing substantive changes, like I said, in mindsets and intangible changes on the ground. And there are many ways to take large steps toward the goals of increased genetic gain and increased variety turnover. And I expect you're going to learn about many of these ways over the next 3 days. And so I really put it to you to challenge yourself to think of what are the 3 things that you will take from this event and implement to create change towards your goals for increased rate of genetic gain and variety turnover. And with that, I will hand it back over to, I guess, you, Sarah. I'm sorry, I've gone just a little bit over here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael, and thanks for trying to stick to time. So thank you again for that overview. There's a lot of food for thought there. I'd now like to hand over to Barbara. Barbara, are you ready to share your screen?
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone. I did want to really start out and acknowledge Michael for your really inspirational vision and leadership as you've taken excellence in breeding and crops and hunger, and really bringing all this together to help guide and inspire the new One CG breeding and reform that we're now undergoing and undertaking. It is my pleasure to share some words with you today. I'm noticing that there's some 180 people on the call, so it's very inspirational actually to be with all of you. So the One CG actually marks a significant transformation in the way we operate to improve food, land, and water systems. Now, I would say overall, the One CG does provide this transformational opportunity, but EiB has really been leading the way in bringing centers together. So, this whole concerns that funders had, that the centers operated kind of independently in their own projects and programs. I think we should really take a moment to pause and acknowledge that we have kind of led the charge on this challenge that we've been faced with. But this new configuration of our talents and capacities does provide a fresh opportunity to shape a stronger, more relevant and integrated science agenda for today's dynamic world. The integration of our knowledge, assets, and people united in action to confront the challenges facing our world will translate into a sharper, impact-focused, and consensus-building governance that presents at a global, regional, and country level. The One CGIAR is based on the premise that our people, together with our partners, can deliver relevant development impacts more consistently and effectively when collaborating under fewer institutional boundaries and supported by empowered management, clear governance, and integrated operational structure. And of course, all of this comes together not as internally looking, as Michael very much pointed out, this is really about operating in a much more focused way with partners in the regions, in the countries, in the sub-regions, and on the ground. So this slide kind of demonstrates, and this is one that Yo and Martin and I have used quite a bit as we share kind of the overall vision of the action areas in the science groups and how that all comes together with the regional integrated initiatives. So first of all, keep in mind, and Mike went through the 5 impact areas, and of course the 2030 research strategy is in fact geared to deliver on these 5 impact areas, being nutrition and health, poverty reduction, livelihoods and jobs, gender equity, youth and social inclusion, climate adaptation and mitigation, and environmental health and biodiversity. So as you look at each of the action areas, so Yo Swinen is the regional or the global director, science director for systems transformation. And it is really looking at enabling environmental level solutions, policies, institutions, really at the national, regional, and international levels. And then when you look at resilient agri-food systems, or RAFS, that is led by Martin Croft, you begin to get to the on-farm landscape integrated solutions. And then we have genetic innovations, which is the informed technological solutions that brings together varieties and seeds really at the farm level. And at the center and core of all of this, of course, is the demand creation, the scaling, the feedback loops that occur at the regional level. So this is how we see this all coming together. So, and backing up a little bit, I should also note that we have been in the process of developing these 33 initiatives. We have submitted 15 of them as of the 30th of September, and then the rest are intended to be submitted by next week. But this, excuse me, this is where this all comes together, that we have the various initiatives that each of the action areas are working on. And we also have 6 regionally integrated initiatives that are led by Martin, along with the resilient agri-food initiatives. So from a genetic innovation standpoint, we really have 4 groups, and I think you're mostly all quite familiar with this. But we have the market intelligence that is really intended to begin to inform better our product pipelines. The gene banks, which is intended, it's the conservation, you're all familiar with the gene banks, but of course it's not only conservation, but use of the gene banks. We have the plant breeding, and of course, Michael went through very in great detail the accelerated breeding, meeting farmers' needs with nutritious climate resilient crops. We have the enabling technologies. Now those have been submitted, and then we're in the process of determining the submission of the precision genetic technologies. And then of course we have Seed Equal, that we had one funder that really referred to the seed systems as the 3rd leg in the stool, that it was so critical that we had breeding and we had the tools, but we really needed to make sure that we developed the seed systems going forward. So this is the genetic innovations and the initiatives that we're taking forward. So when you look at just in general, the implementation for impact, this is about implementing our work with the farmers. And as Michael went in detail, it's how we work in much our partnership. And I think as you look at what our funders have been saying and demanding of us, is some 30 or 30% plus of our resources would actually go to be working with the One CGIAR networks, really working at market intelligence, getting feedback loops going from the a demand-driven process, prioritizing the breeding investments in high-impact market segments. And this is the prioritization that Michael spoke so well about. The increasing the seed sector investment and making sure that the varieties that we develop are demanded by the end user. And this has to also include, it's not only the farmers, but as we begin to look at products that are needed in rural environments and processing, there needs to be very unique characteristics that are needed for processing versus fresh. And then of course we have the gene bank and then the precision genetic technologies. So the genetic innovation implementation for partners, it's really looking at tools, and this is where EIB has really set precedents as far as, and Michael went through the successes that we've seen, and we need to continue to enhance and increase those successes. But the enabling tools and technologies to really modernize our breeding programs, and by ours, I mean ours and our partners, really focused on the end user needs to drive those breeding programs. So we did put together the the market intelligence initiative to have a very good handle on end user demand and what that feedback loop is. And we've been talking about the need to develop varieties that turn over in 10 years rather than some varieties that have been in fields for very long periods of time, and increasing the productivity of those varieties. And of course, it's strengthening the national and regional seed systems, and also developing business models with partners, not only public, but also private sector. And then the new multi-stakeholder collaboration hub that I'm sure you'll hear more about as this goes on, and really developing this feedback loop, and the investor dashboard to monitor the return on investment for sustainable outcomes. So with that, let's see. So as I mentioned, we really are fortunate that we had excellence in breeding and the crops to end hunger. And we absolutely acknowledge the funders who have given us the opportunity to begin to build and bring this together. We have the kind of first starter advantage, if you will, on bringing together the One CG as we look at the breeding programs and the modernization tools, et cetera. So I think we have a great example to continue to build on, and a terrific team that we have a great future together. And so with that, Michael, I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Barbara. Thank you for that contextualization. It's really helpful as we start to frame the discussions going forwards. So as Adam has indicated in the chat, we're a little behind schedule. So if you do have any questions to the presentations from either Michael or Barbara, please put them in the chat. We'll collate them and try and post responses on the website if and where possible. So let's move back to the rest of our agenda. Let me try and share my screen. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the module spotlights. So just a quick 4-minute overview from each module. So as we've already mentioned, EIB is trying to assist breeding programs and improve the experience and impacts of the overall breeding community. So we deliver on our objectives through 7 interconnected modules, which are listed here. And what we're going to do now is briefly go through each module, and each module lead will give an overview of some of the highlights of their work in the last few years. So first of all, we'll hear from Peter Coldrake. I do request that module leads do hand over to the next module as you're finishing your spotlight. I will be hopefully driving the presentation. So Peter, over to you with your first slide.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Good day to everybody that's joined the call. What I would like to do is just give you a very high-level view of Module 1, which is product design and management. And what this module aims to do is to transform how products are designed, created, and managed in public breeding networks. And to do that, what we've done is develop and provide a consistent terminology and approaches to identify market segments, create target product profiles, align breeding pipelines to market segments, and develop the pipeline investment cases that Michael referenced. And if we do all this well, then what we do is provide the foundation set of information for all the other modules in EIB to prioritize and focus their efforts. So by defining the pipelines, it gives Eduardo's team the set of pipelines they need to focus on. By developing product profiles, it gives Gustavo's team the set of traits that they need to be developing phenotyping tools for, etc., etc. So if we can go to the next slide, please, Sarah. So what have we done in Module 1 over the last year or so? Most significant from my perspective is the addition of Jason Donovan and Agnes Gatonga to Module 1 to provide some additional resource to what I've been able to bring to the module and really help us divide and conquer and move forward on identifying the market segments. And we've currently identified 372 unique market segments at the 1 CG sub-region level for 23 crops across 8 centers. And so this is the first time that the complete effort of the CG for what the market segments are has been identified. Then we went on and identified 142 breeding pipelines and aligned those pipelines to a market segment or market segments. And so now we can see which of the market segments are being served. We understand the size or the opportunity in each market segment. We understand the level of investment that we're making in each breeding pipeline towards a market segment or a combination of market segments. And that in turn allowed us to create 142 pipeline investment cases. And so here we're just aligning opportunity with investment and taking a look to see, is the alignment satisfactory? Does the alignment and what we're doing and what those pipelines are focused on line up with the major impact objectives, etc., etc. So it gives us a set of information to understand where we are and gives us a set of information to determine how we would like to move forward, and that we can explain what we're doing and what the impact of making an investment in a particular pipeline will be as far as improving nutrition levels of people, moving people out of poverty, etc., etc. So I hope this gives you a feel for what we've been able to achieve in Module 1 over the last year or so. I thank you for listening. I hope that you'll come to one of the Module 1 open houses and that you'll have questions and that you'll provide some direction to us as we continue to refine what we're doing as Module 1. Now I would like to introduce Module 2 and ask Eduardo to take over and go from here. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. I'm really happy to actually see that many people. I think the fact that you're here, implies that you care and that you see us as partners. So I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. So I guess, I'll take from what Peter was saying. We're trying in Module 2 to leverage from having good targets, like everything well designed, and basically help our stakeholders, which are the breeders, to design better breeding strategies. So really what Module 2 tries to do is that, create some partnerships with all of you, provide you some support, some technical support, like, the quantitative genetics component, the simulation support to kind of test these alternatives or all these alternative breeding strategies and understand what can we win from those strategies, or when those are not a good idea, and try to also put some logistics and resources and layers on top. But besides the technical, we also want to engage with all of you, create this sense of community, partnership, and help you to coordinate with other modules, also with other collaborators like the private sector, like the consultants, like other CG centers, like other breeders, to basically improve your breeding schemes, to also improve some of the methods, technologies, access to services, and all that, by a one-to-one relationship. I think many of you have seen some of those different projects coming together and rising. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So, some of the achievements, and I want to say these achievements are not from Module 2, but just of these partnerships. I think this only can happen if the breeding teams or the breeders want to really improve their programs, want to optimize their breeding schemes. And some of those notable achievements, are the projects with IITA, Cassava, and JAM, and the rice programs across the system with Africa Rice, EiB, SEAT, the potato and sweet potato programs, pushing the improvements, forages and beans at SEAT. I mean, all these programs that, proactively, they reach Module 2 and they say, Eduardo, I want to improve this. And we take people from the modules and consultants to make some simulations, to understand the constraints, to come up with an improvement plan and try to engage people like Eng and Gustavo in bringing genotyping support, in bringing analytic support, in bringing some of these tools and methods that are available. I think those achievements are, like I said, not Module 2, but part of this partnership. And something that I think is also a big success within the system is the adoption of KPIs. We have started this 2021 with realized genetic gain as a KPI for monitoring the improvements. And I think this is going to be very impactful. So this is just a high-level view. I hope that if you have questions or you want to, just provide us feedback. I think that's something that we need to make more. Please join some of the open house sessions for Module 2 in day 1 or day 3. And from my side, that is all for now. And I will hand it to Eng in the genotyping module. Sorry for all the light that is coming through my window.
Thanks, Eduardo. So good day, everyone. My name is Eng Hua, and I'll be sharing today some Module 3 highlights. So Module 3 is primarily a service coordination module, providing access and support on genotyping and sequencing needs to the wider CGIAR NARS breeding network. So Module 3 consists of 3 full-time staff members with a regional focus. Myself, I'm currently located at EiB headquarters in the Philippines. Ana Oliveira, she's a regional genotyping coordinator located in Kenya, and Rajaguru, he's our regional coordinator located in South Asia. So together, the 3 of us coordinate the services through collective bargaining to find the most cost-effective and fit for purpose and scalable solutions to suit the various breeding program needs. So through the use of the latest genotyping technologies, we hope to enable breeding partners to achieve greater selection accuracy and lower their cost per unit gain. And currently, we have 2 fully operational low-cost and high-throughput genotyping platforms. Some of the routine applications supported through these platforms include routine genomic selection, QA/QC, marker-assisted selection, and DNA fingerprinting. To ensure proper integration of genotyping solutions, Module 3 always strives to work with both internal EIB members and external breeding teams to ensure genotyping activities are properly planned and costed. When and where applicable, deploy on a network basis to reduce the duplications. This is especially important as all the CGIAR centers start to think about and as we transition towards One CGIAR and to operate more as a network with our NARS partners. Next slide, please. So here I'll just like to highlight some of the notable achievements for Module 3 in 2021. And I would like to also point out that it is important that without these achievements would not have been possible without the strong buy-ins and support from the various funders and breeding teams contributing their time and effort and know-how in setting up these services. So in 2021, we have successfully launched the mid-density genotyping platform. It's a custom amplicon-based platform as of Q1 of this year. And thanks to contributions from all the partners, we now have a total of 15 crop species with validated low density markers on the LDSG platform and 11 species with mid-density marker panels, either production ready or under validation for the MDSG platform. These number of species and resources exclude the ones which are actually non-CGIAR mandate species. So in total, we actually have more other non-CG mandate crop species available through the platform, but they are just leveraging our shared services for their respective breeding needs. As of 2021, we have a total of 54 CGIAR and NARS institutes actively accessing the services, spanning across 31 countries. And year on year, we average about 30 to 40% growth in the past 2 years in terms of overall business volume, which is very, very good improvements year on year. And thanks again to all the support from all the breeding networks leveraging the service that we have. And due to the COVID pandemic, we have also modified our support and services and gearing it more towards digital platforms. Content in the EIB Module 3 toolbox has been revamped and expanded in 2021. We now have various logistics training modules and updated market information sheets, which are continuously being updated, and they're all made publicly accessible. An automated service submission portal is also expected to become online by end of this year or early 2022. So with that, I would like to thank everybody for your continued support, and I certainly hope to see you in our Module 3, one of the Module 3 open houses. I'll now hand over the floor to my Module 4 colleague for the next presentation. Gustavo, over to you.
Thanks, Ang. Yeah, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I'm Gustavo Teixeira. I'm leading the breeding operation and phenotyping module 4. So our goal in this module is to help the breeding programs to have the most effective and cost-efficient phenotypic process. And we want then to have the culture of delivery data quality with the continuous improvement mindset, with respect and safety for all employees. So this is our goal. And how we do that? We do that starting with understanding the demand. And demand sometimes comes from product or breeding specific demand that comes from the product profile, as Peter said and as Eduardo said too, on specific traits or whatever, but also comes with the station or demand. So that's why we did this. We do the assessment. So this is where we start understanding the need. From this assessment, we also provide help and support on infrastructure improvement. And with that, we have our either in terms of engineering capacity. So currently we have Vinicius in Eastern and Southern Africa and Amir in Western and Central Africa, helping the institutions with the engineering capacity, with supporting them to improve their infrastructure and by consequence the operation too. So and of course when we have some projects from Crop to End Hunger, we hope that this can also help with the implementation of some projects to improve based on the demand. The other component that we connects with the improvement, not only in terms of infrastructure, but also to improve other operational part, is the capacity development. And with that, we have two main aspect. One is the mindset. And the mindset here is, from the operation perspective, aligned with Eduardo's work in continuous improvement in terms of designing better pipelines. So this would be with more going to Six Sigma or the component. But in our mindset in the operations, we think much more on lean methodology. So this is what we think in terms of mindset, capacity development for mindset for the operational staff, for operational people. The other component in capacity development is technical skills. And for that, we have some areas from irrigation, from seed processing, from phenotyping, that we want people to improve too. Please go to the next slide, please. Yeah. So, and with these things in mind, or with this approach, we launched this year the BOND, that is the Breeding Operation Network for Development, that is the capacity development for the technical skills, where people, operational staff, they from different institutions, from different crops, they work together, they share in projects, they share in experience, they share in protocols, they share in practices. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. So this is the goal for the BOND, and this is what we launched this year. For the mindset component in terms of behaviors, we have the operational excellence. We helped EiB to structure the continuous improvement team. We are now working close with IITA to structure similar capacity in IITA, and working also with CIMIT to improve the DH process. And also we launched the e-learning module for operational excellence. With that, we reached approximately 100 staff. They are trained in as a operational excellence practitioner. The other important project that we are managing now is the 15 stations upgrade with mechanization, infrastructure improvement. That is an important project for breeding, to deliver the breeding capacity. And another project we started this year too is the maintenance project, helping to structure better the maintenance for field equipment, etc. Yeah, so thank you. I hope that also I hope to see you in our open house. We really want to hear from you, get your feedback, get your suggestions. How can we do more, or how can we improve what we do? I would like to invite Yongwa to go to the module 5 work. Thanks.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Younghwa Lee, and I lead Module 5, Breeding Informatics. The goal of Module 5 is to increase the incorporation of modern informatics capabilities into best practice breeding processes. And to our partners, we provide the development of the enterprise breeding system. A big part of the team is a group of software developers. We also are responsible for coordinating the breeding IT strategy for One CGIAR. Streamlining the support and the usage of BMS, BreedBase, and EBS going forward. And we are also responsible for the coordination of biometric and bioinformatic capabilities for One CGIAR as a global resource. We particularly coordinate a lot with the adoption and outreach to support the data management needs of our partners. Next slide, please. So in the past year, some of our notable achievements have been, we have released version 3 of the enterprise breeding system with a beta release of the analytics framework that you'll hopefully see in the next several weeks in a CG-wide demo. And I really want to commend the team for having accomplished this in the past year in the middle of a pretty major restructuring of the EBS program. So so they've been really like really change agents, I guess I would say, to go with the theme. In the past year, we've also with StarGao established the Breeding Informatics Network, which is an alliance of breeders, biometricians, and bioinformaticians to coordinate CG-wide standards and best practices in analytics. And we do this both in support of breeding programs and but also to give input into the development of the EBS analytics framework. And finally, with Module 3, we've initiated the Reference Genome Project, which is a CTEH-funded project to provide high-quality reference genome resources for marker development for all CTEH crops. By the end of 2 or 3 years, we want to take marker development away as a barrier to the use of markers in breeding, is the goal. Yeah, I hope to see you in our open house. If you have any questions, I always ready to hear some feedback about how we can do better. And now I would like to pass to Bish Das to talk about NARS coordination. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Yunhua. So I'll give a quick overview about the NARS engagement team and the work that we're doing. So my name is Bish Das. I lead the NARS engagement team for excellence in breeding. Also on the team, we have Lenin Muzundire. So Lenin is optimization specialist. He's based here in Nairobi. He's supporting programs in Eastern and Southern Africa. We also have Sanjay Katiyar. He's the optimization specialist based in Hyderabad, and he's supporting national partners in South Asia. So all three of us are based in the region. We're interacting with our partners, we're traveling, we're visiting them. We've also all coming from applied breeding backgrounds in the region, so we've lived the experience. And we're familiar with many of the challenges that some of our national partners are facing. So we're 3 in the core team, and we also have 7 consultants who are helping us to implement various projects. So the aims of this module are really 2. So the first one is to support NARS breeding programs per se to modernize. So we're working one-on-one with various national breeding programs and supporting them to modernize their programs and operations. And the second area where we've started working, particularly over the last 18 months in response to the funders' requests, as Michael alluded to in his talk, is to facilitate stronger CGIAR NARS breeding networks. And this is really important to ensure alignment between the objectives and the goals of national programs with the regional CGIAR efforts. Also it's important because as we started working with a lot of individual national breeding programs, we quickly came to realize that one of the biggest challenges for national breeding programs is the lack of operational budget. So when programs, and that's not a reflection of the teams, it's just a reflection of the funding system at the moment. So in this situation, it's really important to have more of a collaborative approach where funding is a little bit limited. So we engage with all the other EIB modules. Essentially, we're a linkage module. We work with the national programs. We identify and define demand for various services. So if we work with a national program and they require support for genotyping, they're making a whole bunch of new crosses and they need to do F1 QA/QC, we link them to the Module 3 team. If they're running certain operations, running a large number of trials and need support with seed counting, for example, we connect them to the Module 4 team and so on. So we're linking with all the different modules in EIB. Next slide, please. Right, so some of the notable achievements. So this year, we've developed modernization plans for 8 new NARS breeding programs. So we're currently now working with 23 different national breeding programs in about 10 countries. And the focus is very much on the crops to end hunger priority commodities. Lenin has done a lot of work to deploy the University of Queensland costing tool to 5 pilot breeding programs in Eastern and Southern Africa. Some of that work will be showcased in the workshop next week. That's been a key step for many national programs to understand their operational costs for the first time. We've made some strategic investments with support from Crops to End Hunger. in various national rice breeding programs. And we've also developed this model for CGIAR's collaborative models, a collaborative network, and that's sparking a lot of discussion. And actually that's going to be the subject of our breakout session today. So if you'd like to learn more about that model, provide input, please do join the breakout session today. We will have another breakout session on Thursday where we will discuss scaling approaches. So with that, thank you for joining and thank you for your attention. I'd now like to hand over to Liz Jones, who's leading technology adoption and outreach. Over to you, Liz.
Thank you, Bish. And so Module 7 is a fairly new module looking at technology adoption and outreach. And the goals of this module are to provide support to breeding programs to operationalize the outputs of other modules. And this year we've been focusing on Module 4 and the equipment purchases that Module 4 has been making, and also the outputs of Module 5 with software development, as Younghwa was just mentioning. So the first space that we've been focusing on is training and documentation, but we really want to take that further and be able to understand the barriers to adoption and provide solutions. So a number of areas that we've been working on so far. First of all, we have built the Training and Adoption Network, or TRAIN. And TRAIN is very important because there's a lot of expertise already existing within the CGIAR centers working on their own projects in the area of training and adoption. And the goal of the TRAIN team was to bring these people together and to work together to be able to work on the outputs of different modules. And they've provided tremendous support, enabled the setup and calibration of over 500 pieces of equipment across 43 centers, and provided at least one training in each of those centers in combination with relevant software. And they've also been very helpful in providing input into 2021 equipment purchases. So adjusting what we're doing and providing input to be able to improve the purchases that we're making so they're more relevant for breeding programs. We also recognize there was a gap at IATA for EBS adoption, and so we are very grateful for CTH support for providing the funding to be able to build up that team. And that team has been instrumental in being able to curate all of the IATA maize data and actually align it with CIMMYT maize data. And this is the first major step in being able to bring two different crop breeding programs together into a single EBS system. And the consequence of this is that we'll be able to generate much bigger data sets that are going to have much more power for maize breeding in the CGIAR. So that's EBS. We're also working with BMS, and we have worked with the integrated breeding platform to be able to provide support for adoption of BMS across key NAS centers. And we've worked with Bish to define those key NAS centers. We've curated a lot of the data, provided intensive training and support to those NAS centers. And we're already starting to see a shift in them using this data and the software to be able to set up experiments and collect data into the system. And I have some metrics on that I can share if you can join the open house coming next. Of course, we can't use software or digitization without good internet. And so we've had a couple of internet improvement projects with Stefan Arneson at Cornell University, who's done several of these before. And we've seen a dramatic improvement in the internet infrastructure at these centers, and then we'll be monitoring, how this is really impacting their everyday programs. And I can share more of that too at our open house. And then last but not least, in that left-hand corner of my slide, we've also worked with a company called RTI to be able to build a technology adoption framework. And this recognizes we can't just purchase equipment and develop software. There are a lot of complementary resources that need to be in place, such as the internet, and also consumables, ready consumables and peripherals to be in place, as well as provide that training. But there's a large portion of organizational change that also needs to happen, and institutional policy. And so how we bring all of those factors together to be able to help breeding programs adopt these technologies is key moving forward. So thank you, and join us in the open house coming up next.